Bonnie Kirby is the founder of Well Dressed Nashville. Well Dressed Nashville is an online elevated closet sale featuring the closets of Nashville's most stylish and influential women and celebrities. In the past 2 years, Well Dressed Nashville has worked with women like Caroline Bryan, Brittany Kelly, Hillary Scott, Hunter Primo, Sean Johnson East, yes, the Olympian, and many more. Before all of that, she was a pediatric oncology nurse. Talk about a pivot. And before that, I have to say, she was my best friend. Yes, Bonnie and I have been thick as thieves since we were 3 years old. And it blows my mind because my daughter is 3 now, hers is 4. And it's just crazy how truly insane and unusual this long of a friendship is. I think it's unicorn status. How is it possible to stay friends with someone who you got along with in preschool? I don't know. I'm really not sure, but we've somehow figured it out. We're going to unpack that today, along with Bonnie's journey from sorority girl to nurse to kids with cancer, and then her unexpected pivot into full-blown entrepreneurship. Let's go. Bonnie, welcome to Hustle and Grace.
Good morning.
Does it feel like you've been here once before?
We might have done this once before.
Oh my gosh. I have to just tell the listeners that, hey, Beckett, you want to be on YouTube? I just have to tell the listeners that we did try this once before, and I've done over 60 episodes of Hustle and Grace, and I have never lost an interview file until I interviewed Bonnie about a month ago. And I have to say, I was so relieved. If I'm going to have to make that call and say, hey, remember that whole interview we did? It's gone. At least it was someone who I've known for 34 years.
Yeah, at least it was me.
And the reason that I've kept you around so long is because you were chill, and God bless. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me. So other than the other time that we did this, I've never interviewed someone who I know quite so well. So it's kind of funny to sort of like put on that like interviewer hat, but I'm really excited too, because I think that you have so much value to add to the audience in our Hustle and Grace conversation. So I kind of want to start with just talking about friendship. Like I said in the intro, we've been friends. We were kind of like forced friends when we were, before we even got to kindergarten. Our parents like got us together and were like, you shall be friends. But that was it. Beyond that, our friendship persisted because of us, not because of any sort of outside forces. So I'm just curious from your perspective, and I'm not your only long lasting friendship for sure. And you're not mine either, but what do you think that is sort of the secret sauce when it comes to a long lasting friendship?
Well, ours is obviously my longest. And I think there's a lot of things that go into it. I think one of the big ones is that both the people involved are really like committed to the friendship. And I think everybody goes through seasons. Like, obviously we are both moms and we're both very busy, and it's easy to like, not talk for a month, but we don't typically do that. We typically
very unusual.
It's very unusual. And so I think it's really that commitment to that friendship. And I think it's seeing the other person and like loving them through all their seasons. And I think that is another thing, because people do change over. I mean, I feel like we are inherently who we are and who we were then, but like we've gone through a lot of changes, and we have like championed each other through them more so than like felt like, oh, she's leaving me out, or I don't understand that, so I am not really going to be a part of that relationship for that time.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think like I want to kind of clarify that our friendship is not one of those where it's like, oh, whenever we do talk, we just pick back up where we left. And it's like nothing has changed. Like, it's not like that. Like, we have stayed in communication and connected consistently from elementary school, high school, college, those weird 20s years, and now like in parenthood and entrepreneurship and all of that. And yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, I think that you have to in a long friendship, you have to welcome the new version of your friend when they do change and grow, like when you became a mom, or when you stepped into entrepreneurship, or when you got a dog. these were big pieces of like adulthood and change. And I think that's a really big part of it. And always just being supportive and curious about that other person. And also not being like a scorekeeper either of like, who's calling who more, or who's reaching out more, or whatever. And just trusting that the other person is coming from a good place with like good intentions, I think is important too.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about your business. So you are the founder of Well Dressed Nashville, and it's a really interesting, even like business concept that I don't think is super common. So why don't you just share a little bit about like paint a picture for the listeners of like your life before you launch this business? Because I think people who maybe have connected with you online, like in recent years, don't know that, that who you are now and the work that you do is really different than before. So just kind of share a little bit of that journey.
So I went into college pre-med, because that was just what I was kind of told I was going to do with my life. And I kind of always I thought that would be a cool career for me. And then I decided to pursue nursing midway through college because I felt like that was a better fit for my personality and who I am. So I loved nursing. I was a nurse for 13 years, and I always did pediatrics. Kids has always been my thing. So I had never really even thought about starting a business. Like that wasn't something that I never had that like bug that I feel like some people always have, like who are always coming up with these ideas about business.
It wasn't like your secret dream that you just never told
anyone.
Not
ever my secret dream. No. And so I went to a closet sale in September of 2019. There were all these influencers who were doing an in-person closet sale, and I have always loved clothes, this, in fashion. And so I went to that, and it was wild. Like there were so many girls who showed up, so many, it was just insane. And so I just looked around and I was like, there's a market for this. Like, obviously there's a huge market. It hasn't been tapped into. So I went to dinner that night and basically like made a business plan, but it was just like this lightning strike moment, which I've never really like experienced, where I saw something that like really needed to be done. And it was something that I loved. Like I love that whole world. I always have. I mean, you remember me buying like celebrity magazines like my entire life. Like that was
for sure
my jam.
For sure. So I'm curious about, okay, so you go to this closet sale, you kind of have this light bulb moment. You've been a nurse, you have little kids at home. You go to dinner, you're like, this is a business. You like write it down on a napkin. Like, what are the pieces in your life that sort of tell you now is a good time to do this? Like,
I don't think it was a good time.
Okay.
If I'm being really honest with you, my youngest was like not even one. So I was like, still had a baby, and we, were like navigating that whole, so she's adopted. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but like navigating that whole relationship with her birth mom. But you know this about me, and no one else really knows this as much, but like, if I decide something and like, I'm going to do it. Like,
right.
If I get like a fire in me about something, it's happening.
Sure.
So I was just like, well, I'm obviously doing this.
Now, were you thinking like, I'll try it. Like we'll do like one sale, like see how it goes, or were you like, oh no, like this is an empire?
No, I had no like thoughts of this being a whole like full-time situation. It was going to be a biannual thing starting out. But it just quickly turned into a whole other thing.
It did. It did. And let's talk about the timing of that. So that first sale was fall 2019, and it was like what you had envisioned, right? Like there was like charcuterie and like good music, and it was like a party where you shop, right?
Yeah.
And then what happened?
And then I was planning the spring event, and then I put my, $2,000 deposit down and picked a space and all that, and was working on that. But then COVID hit. So I was sad.
Sure.
And I was immediately like, well, I just started a business like 5 minutes ago, like not even any time ago. And I was getting some momentum with it. And so the nurse in me was basically not on board with everybody else who thought, give it a week and we'll be back.
Like you saw the writing on the wall.
I did. So I thought to myself, I was like, either this dies here or I figure out a way to make it work. So that way was putting it all online. And at that moment, I shifted it to completely focus on influencers. Up until then, it wasn't completely influencers. Because I thought if I'm putting it online, then I'm going to have to scale it down because I have to figure out how to actually do this first. And all of these people have online presences anyway. And so that will really help me market and sell this thing more quickly.
That was like, I don't even know if you knew in the moment, like how brilliant of a marketing move that was. Cause you're basically like borrowing the voices and the audiences of all these people and partnering with them. Like it's a win-win for everyone involved. And then, all of their fans and followers then have an awareness of Well Dressed Nashville, and they learn that they can buy clothes from their, favorite online personalities. So brilliant, and artists and creatives. So cool. So something that I have to say, I've always admired about you, and also like at times have been like, oh God, here we go again, is that you are willing to talk to anybody. Everybody's going to be your friend. You walk anywhere and you're like, Bonnie is going to speak to a stranger, which is awesome. And the more time that I've spent in the North, and even though I live in the DC area and people here are like, this is not the North, they compared to Nashville, Tennessee, where we grew up together, it's definitely the North. And they're much more like smiling and like small talk in the South and in Nashville. But Bonnie takes it to like a whole nother level. She is not afraid of people. She's not afraid to reach out. And so I think that has kind of become your superpower in growing this business. So like, where did that, well, I don't want to ask where did it come from, but I would love for you to just kind of unpack like how that has been a part of your business. I think it's kind of like your unfair advantage, like your just willingness to reach out, like who cares? Like, we'll see what happens. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think that's the biggest question I get asked most frequently is how I've done what I've done in such a short amount of time, and gotten the yeses I've gotten. Because I think a lot of people think growing up in Nashville that you and I like, hung out with Garth Brooks or something.
No.
But I didn't start this business with like a phone, full of names that I could call on and be like, oh, can I like, or even people that I knew who could get me to people. Now,
not well connected.
We have a couple people, but it wasn't like something that I was even going to use in the beginning. I was holding out on a couple of those. So I basically just, I started small. I knew that I couldn't reach out to Sean immediately when I started this business. I feel like
Shawn Johnson, Olympian
right.
gymnast.
Sorry. Shawn Johnson.
Shawn. We're on a first name basis.
We text.
My girl, Shawn.
Yes. So I started more with like, not micro influencers, but maybe some like 10,000, 20,000 in that world. Because I knew I had to have some social proof. Like I had to start somewhere. And then I would look, I'm giving you all my secrets of what I did, but I would look at the people who those people were connected to and who they were friends with. And it would probably be people who I knew I would be goal people for me. So start with their best friend or somebody they were really close to, and then get them to do it. And then they could help me get the next person.
It sounds very strategic.
I love strategy. Like the strategy behind this is really fun. Now, I don't want it to sound like gross and like, it isn't that way. It wasn't like, oh, I have like a whole like diagram and stuff. It's nothing like that. It's more like the people thing for me. Like when I say that I really love people, I legitimately love people. So I really do love getting to know all of these people and like learning who they are and their stories. And like the networking part of this is my most favorite thing. Like if I could be at a point in my business where I only did that, that would be like the dream.
I think that's very possible. I think that the way that it has grown in just over the past 2 years, like there's no reason that can't be where you are 2 years from now. Now, part of that is letting go a little bit and delegating. How's delegating going for you?
It's good. It's going better than it was.
Good.
So I feel like that is one of the hardest things that being an entrepreneur is the delegation part of it. And I think you can attest to that because, and it was something that everyone said, like, you have to be able to let things go if you want to grow this thing. And if you want to do it in a decent amount of time, like if you don't want to take 10 years to grow it, you're going to have to let go of some things. And I think honestly, you have to let go of it. I don't even know. I don't think I could do what I've done by myself ever. Like, but I am such a collaborator that I love that part of it. But I do think, and I think several people have asked me, like, what is like some of your biggest advice to entrepreneurs and all that. But I think your first hire is honest to God, like a make or break it in an entrepreneur life. Because that has been my biggest like achievement, is having Maddie, who is my assistant. I wouldn't say I'm completely out of operations, but she is doing 85% of operations at this point. So I've been able to let go of that, which has been really, really just crucial to growing. Honestly, now that I have like this like delegation situation, I'm like, I would love to be able to hire like 2 more people and just like, but we're not there yet. We're getting there. We're working on it.
Little by little.
Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting too is, when you are doing too much, or when you need to tap out, when you're doing more than really your body can sustain, your body begins to tell you, it begins to like have those red flags and those like warning signs. And I think that has happened for you a couple of times in your life. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
For sure. I think most recently, I guess we can speak on that. One of my biggest flaws is I have FOMO. Just in general.
We both do. We both.
Yeah, we both do. And so I was planning, basically I had scheduled having 3 events within a month's period of time. And I had gotten through the first 2, and the second one was like our huge sale that takes a ton of work and like a huge amount of manpower and brains and thinking and strategy and all that. And so I was planning to turn around a week and a half later and do my 3rd event. And that was going to be an in-person event. And I woke up one morning and I was like doubled over in pain. And I realized I had a stomach ulcer. So, at that point I knew, okay, well, we have officially hit capacity here. And my body basically made me sit down, which I want to get better about, like knowing beforehand. Like, I don't want to have to get a stomach ulcer.
You don't, right. We don't always want it to have to come to that. It would be good if it didn't have to always come to that.
So I'm trying to get better at that.
Now, did your head know before that, like, this is too much, but I don't want to miss out on anything. So,
but I was pushing because that 3rd event was going to be really cool. It was going to be during CMA Fest, and it was going to be something that I thought would be really great for the business. And, it just sounded so fun. This is my problem. It all sounds so fun. So I am trying to figure out how to really listen to like my gut, which obviously I didn't listen that well, but get better at listening and saying, okay, this is all you can handle. I sometimes forget, like, we are a 2-person team at this point. Like, that's it. There's literally 2 humans.
Could you repeat that? You kind of just broke up a little bit.
Who is running this whole shebang. So I have to remember, or I have to remind myself a lot, that there's only like 2 of us running this whole thing. And so you have to kind of know what your team can handle. And we could not handle 3 events. And,
now we know.
Yeah. Now we know.
Yeah. I'd love to talk a little bit more about vulnerability and like listening to your gut, listening to your body, and even just like your own like mental health journey. I don't think that you've really spoken about it publicly, but I know that it has been a journey and, a progression over the years. So can you share a little bit about just your mental health journey, like in your 20s and your 30s?
Yeah. I have always had a very like perfectionistic personality. And so I think with that comes anxiety. When I was growing up, there was a lot of pressure, and it was a lot of it was on like me giving myself the pressure. That always kind of has been how I am, to achieve and excel. And
let's also add this context. Like,
have always
let's add this context to like the middle school and the high school you went to was like a special school for like super smart kids. So you were it was like almost like an Ivy League kind of experience, but like 13-year-olds, 15-year-olds. So there was that pressure, even from school, from home, mom and dad, and internally, like it was all happening. Right.
Right. Yeah. And so I usually like handled it okay. And I didn't really get to a point where I kind of needed more help than what I could cope with on my own until after I had my first son, and I dealt with postpartum anxiety, which is not really talked about so much as postpartum depression, but I feel like it's a lot more prevalent than postpartum depression. So with postpartum anxiety, I just had this like, I had like unrealistic fears frequently, and like heart racing, I started having panic attacks. I had my first like major panic attack at that point, like called an ambulance, thought I was having a heart attack situation. I knew in my head, because I'm a nurse, that it was most likely not a heart attack and it was anxiety. But when you were feeling it, it's like, don't really know, because it feels, I mean, my whole left side of my body went numb, and then I had chest pain and heart racing. So I, at that point I was like, okay, well, maybe I will accept some help at this juncture. So I had been in counseling before with my husband. We'd done premarital counseling and that kind of thing. And, but at that point, that's when I kind of more so went into that world. And then, also got on Zoloft, which I feel like at least 70% of the American population takes, even if they don't want to talk about it. I feel like it should be in the water. It's just my personal opinion, but
it probably shouldn't be in the water, but it probably can really make a difference for people in conjunction with therapy, right? Like
100%.
Medication without therapy is not really solving the problem. Don't you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think therapy is really where the real work happens, but the medication helps you get to a mindset and a place to where you can really work through everything. So that I did therapy for a while. And then I have had moments like where I've been on and off medicine, for anxiety, but right now I'm on, obviously, since I had my stomach ulcer. Scott was like, maybe we should get back on that Zoloft.
maybe it's a sign.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, like, moving forward, like it's been a great year of business for Well Dressed Nashville. It came at a cost, like obviously like your physical health, you overcommitted a little bit. Your physical health like suffered. So what do you do different moving forward? If you're like learning from that past experience, like how do you have the information to where you can then make a different decision moving forward and not have that happen again?
So I think really the thing that needs to shift to make sure that doesn't happen again, is more so and it's something that I am working on. Have you ever heard of Traction? Have you ever read Traction? Okay.
No.
Add it to your list.
Is that a nonfiction book?
It is a nonfiction book.
I don't even know who this person is. She would always like send me her novels and things, and I would not read them, but I would read all the nonfiction. And we just essentially were in different book clubs until she became an entrepreneur. Now she's like reading all the stuff that I've read like 5 years ago, and then all the stuff that I haven't read yet. My mind is blown. Okay. Tell me about Traction.
Okay. So Traction basically is like an entrepreneur operating system.
Cool.
And that's something that we have not had in place. As like a 2-man team, I feel like we've been winging it a lot, and winging it stresses me out. Like I need a plan. Like I need like certain deadlines. Like these are the things. And I think Maddie does too. Like I think that's something she desires too. But when you're in this like startup world, it's really easy to just like put out fires and like just keep going. Be reactive, until you're at a place where you're like, oh, I am burnt out. Because right now, I would even say in the past like couple weeks, I've just been, I mean, you've seen, I haven't been on stories. Like I just needed a minute to like I would say even now still, I'm kind of in the place where I'm like tired. Like I'm not back in that point where I'm like, okay, let's do this. I'm ready to roll. And I don't want to get to that point. Like I don't think it's necessary. I think there's things that we can do to put in place where we have things happening all the time, but it's not like this. Oh gosh, because the last 2 weeks before the big spring sale, it was a cluster. Like we had tons that hadn't been done. It was every minute of every day we were like making stuff happen that should have been done month ago,
Scrambling.
And I just don't want to live that life anymore.
Yeah. Systems and processes are huge. I have to give a shout out to Basecamp. That is the project management software that my team uses, and I'm obsessed with it. Everything is in like a nice project folder, and we can like IM each other. And yeah, so shout out to Basecamp. Sponsor me, please.
Shout out to Basecamp.
Shout out. That's so good.
That has been my biggest challenge though, because I don't come from like a business background at all. And so it's like trying to teach myself so many things in like such a short amount of time. And that now I'm getting to the point where like, I'm seeing that is right now the biggest thing that we need to put in place.
Yeah. I think that would be transformational.
Yeah.
You kind of hinted earlier at advice to aspiring entrepreneurs. Maybe they do have like that secret dream that they have not pursued, unlike you, where you just like thought of it in a minute. Or maybe it's just someone who is like launching out of nowhere, kind of like you did. Like, what would be your like one piece of advice to an entrepreneur who has like recently pivoted and they're like diving into something new, or they're looking for, they're figuring it out. Like they realize like where they are is not working and they want to move to something else. Advice?
I think my biggest advice is that you pursue something that you're happy to do and being unpaid doing it.
Like you would do it even if you weren't getting paid.
Right. You would do it even if you weren't being paid because you love it. I think that would be because you're not going to get paid for a minute. So especially if you reinvest back into the business like you're supposed to.
Yeah, if you bootstrap it.
Yeah, if you bootstrap it, you're not. So you have to really, really love it and like really believe in like the vision and the purpose behind it. I think that's my biggest advice. Because you're gonna have a lot of hard days where you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? And you have to like really actually like it, or you're just gonna like, heck no, I'm done here.
Yeah, I fully agree with that because for me, I once started a side hustle business because I saw like an opportunity. So let's do story time. So I was living in Lynchburg, Virginia at the time, and it was my first house that I had. I was renting, but like it was my own house. I didn't have roommates. It was just me and my husband. We had just gotten married, and I was so excited to do Halloween, like open the door on Halloween and see all the little people come by and trick or treat. And I guess it must have been the Halloween after Frozen came out, and every little girl was Elsa. I was like, what is going on? Like, because I was out of that world, right? I was, I didn't have little kids in my life. And I was like, these children love not only like Disney princesses, but they especially love this Frozen princess. Like, I'm going to do a little research. And I realized that the movie had been huge, like had made billions of dollars. And there was no business in town that was doing character performing for like children's parties and events. And so I thought, oh, here's an opportunity. Like I can start a business for this. Like there's obviously a market. And then the business really only lasted a couple of years, in part because it's got to be more than just an opportunity. Like to me, all the pieces were there. Like I had access to performers. There seemed to be a market. It was something that I knew about, but there also has to be that like love of the thing, because it does take a while before, it really takes off and, does really well and feels like an easy win. It's not an easy win at first. You have to just really love it for what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like if it is going to be a successful business, a lot of times you're not going to want it to be that like initial, like huge success. Number one, because you don't know what you're doing. Number two, you aren't going to you're going to burn out super easy, and super quick, because it all happened. And then you're like, oh gosh, how do I handle this? So, I feel like that now I will say on the outside looking in, people are like, oh, this was like a huge success. Like what you've done so far has been a huge success. But I think that I see it differently. Like I see so much more potential with the business. And so, I feel like we kind of are doing things more slowly. I feel like I could have gone harder in on doing other things to try to kind of catapult it faster. But I want to do it right and figure everything out.
And I think too, you kind of have hinted at the point too of like, when you're launching a new business or a new venture, like it's a good idea to start small, to start slow, and don't quit your day job. Like take your time. You don't want to make it to where it is your whole, your whole living. You know what I mean? Like that.
It's too much pressure on yourself and the business, like that new baby business, unless you have funding, I highly would not suggest that.
Yeah.
I would definitely just do what you can in your off time and just hustle in those moments, until you really feel good about walking away from the thing that's feeding you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that that's true, not only for a business to consumer kind of business like yours, but also in B2B, if you're in consulting or if you're freelancing, like make the most of those hours that like your competition is like just Netflixing and chilling. Like that is when you can build your business. That's when you can build your website. That's when you can be reaching out to potential clients. That's when you can start, really building your brand on LinkedIn. Like there's a lot of space in the margins to really build things before you're putting all your eggs in that basket. Okay. We've gone a little bit over time, I think, of what we were trying to get to in terms of time limit, but this has been awesome, Bonnie. Thank you so much. So many gold nuggets. Share with the fine folks at home or wherever they're listening to this podcast, where they can find you online.
You can just find me on Insta, Well Dressed Nashville. That's where I like to do most of my things. Hopefully I'll be back in the next couple of days after feeling like
Listen, take your time. I just had an awesome conversation with Dory Clark. And it's going to be in the feed soon. And she was talking about like the importance of seasons, like there are seasons where you're producing, there are seasons where you're head down, writing, creating stuff. And there are times when you need to rest, because the goal is not burnout. The goal is the long game. So, and I see Well Dressed Nashville going the distance. So you take care of you. All right.
You're my best friend. You have to say that, but I appreciate you.
Love you.
I love you too.